Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This trailer for Die Hard 2.
Die Hard 2, Die Harder.
The thing is, of the trailer, Andy, I think you can say once we, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll do your part. Well, this is a 90s action trailer, so you kind of have to give it what it is, right? That's kind of your thing, is to remind me that it's a 90s action trailer. and so I'll take that as table stakes, and then I will say to you, Andy, I will say, it's actually not that bad.
I can agree with you, but also at the same time, I mean, this is one of those things where I see things getting given away in the trailer that are big moments. And this is one of those things, like when we were talking about Star Trek First Contact and the reveal of the Borg Queen, kind of her body being put back together and all that sort of stuff. You know, there are big beats that get spoiled in the trailer. And I can see the same discussion happening with the studio here, saying, well, we've got to show the big, the plane blowing up as it's taking off, because that's a big moment. We've got to show the stuntman jumping out of the helicopter onto the wing of the plane while it's flying. That's a big moment, because they show all of that in the trailer, and they're big beats and they're key plot points, especially in the climax, that essentially get spoiled by having them in here. Now, it's contextually, you don't really know that, but these are those moments that people see in a trailer and then they're sitting around expecting to happen. And if they're, savvy trailer viewers like us, they're waiting for it, and they know, okay, well, it hasn't happened yet. It must be the big climax. So I think they give away an awful lot in this trailer. And we talked about it with Star Trek. We talked about it here. I mean, this is that era where the studio's like, you know what, if it's going to get more butts in seats because people see a big blow up, then we're going to put it in the trailer. And that's kind of where we are.
I agree. I was trying to put myself in the headspace of explosions being generic. You know what I mean? Like, it's stuff blowing up, right? And so I kind of get that that's what's going to happen. There's going to be big fireballs and there's going to be crazy stuff. I'm not crazy about some of the big comedy moments, the moments that tried to be funny, the ejector seat moment. It blew last time. It blew you through the back wall of the theater. This time, it'll blow you sky high. I don't like that moment. That is a groaner of a moment. But what it does do, I really want to celebrate what it does right. And what it does right is present a strong what-if case for us. What if a major airport was taken over by terrorists during the holidays? What would happen? Let's pose that as something to think about, and we're going to show you some images that tell you we've explored that, and it's going to be in this movie. And in that regard, I walk away from this trailer thinking, okay, it's a guy I like, John McClane. I know I like him because I saw the first movie, and it's a context that is compelling, because everybody knows the troubles of holiday travel. What if they were further, thrown asunder by this external force? What if? I would like to see that movie. So in that regard, I actually think the trailer was cut together pretty well. The other stuff, the giving away the major effects beats, I guess, I fault the studios and the trailer cutters, and it's just I feel like they don't feel their story itself is strong enough to get people in the seats, so they want to show the very biggest and the baddest moments, and it's just a shame. I feel sorry for them that they have that experience, that they feel like they need to do that. It is more of a pitiful feeling that I get when I watch those now. But I think in terms of just presenting the story, I think they did a pretty good job.
No, I agree. I mean, they do present the story itself well. We get a good sense of what the story is going to be here. To that end, I also thought that the teaser was pretty effective. I actually really liked the way that the teaser is set up, where it's just kind of the bulk of it is kind of text with audio talking about, the what if scenario of it. This is the situation of this this major international airport. This many people come through it every day. This many planes take off every day. This many people work here, all this. And then all of a sudden it comes to a grinding halt. I really liked the way the teaser is set up. And then, of course, it builds to there's only one man who can save it. And then we reveal John McClane. But I loved the setup for that. I thought it was a very effective way to kind of set up a really great what if scenario, which also goes to what we talked about last week with Die Hard, how that was a film that turned into this whole this idea of being able to pitch these takeover stories. Die Hard on a bus, Die Hard in this case, Die Hard at an airport, and that's exactly what these trailers both present.
Exactly right, and check the show notes for that teaser trailer too, because we'll put a link to it in there. It is I watched that teaser after I watched the trailer, and I think. I wish somebody was bold enough to say, you know what, this is the trailer. We're going to go with this.
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be a magnificent trailer for this movie. Not a teaser. This is all you get, and then you're going to go see the movie, because it tells you the same thing. It tells you, here's this airport. It tells you, here are the sounds. It's so driven by this wonderful audio, and then you see John McClane with a cheeky line that says, we know exactly what we're doing. You know what we're doing. How can the same thing happen to the same guy twice?
Exactly.
It is just perfect. And that's the only bit of a clip from the film that you get. Perfect.
And that's all. You're right. That's all you really needed to sell the movie.
Hallelujah, Andy.
Hear, hear.
Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock.
Christmas Eve.
Is there a cop on duty around here?
Airport police.
Let's go get him.
Jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring.
Washington, D.C. International Airport.
What's this about?
Oh, just a feeling I have.
Ouch.
When you get those feelings, insurance companies start to go bankrupt.
The tower's lost control.
Instrument landing system is down.
Backup systems won't come up. We've got blizzard conditions. Zero visibility.
Attention all controllers. We have a code red alert.
There's panic in the air.
This is a professional mercenary. You got the world's biggest drug dealer on his way here now. What do you need, a slide rule to figure this out?
You get the hell out of my office before I throw you out of my damn airport.
And terror on the ground.
Who is this?
Who I am is unimportant. What I want is very important.
Oh, we are just up to our neck in terrorists again, John.
But for police officer John McClane, when I'm right, it's just another Christmas.
You're the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Story of my life.
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we're traveling with John McClane this week, stuck at the airport with crappy weather and terrorists in Renny Harlin's 1990 film Die Hard 2. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you enjoy the show and are interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. You'll get to enjoy our back-channel conversations on Slack and listen to the members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
Is what you expected?
No. This is just the beginning.
I don't like this movie as much as the first one, Andy.
But I feel like there's a but there.
Yeah, it's pretty much the end.
Die Hard this is a series where you're really starting at the pinnacle and just kind of, it's all like, it's all, ups and downs from there, but nothing ever tops that start.
Mostly down.
It's got an interesting, it's an interesting sets of rises and falls. This actually, I have an awful lot of fun with this movie. I don't really hate this movie. I know some people really just don't like it at all. I think it's just ridiculous fun. It's totally Renny Harlin. Like, this is like Renny Harlin at his prime.
Oh, it is peak Renny Harlin, yeah.
It is. And I actually have a lot of fun with it, despite the fact that I don't like John McClane as much in this one. The story is just, a good example of Hollywood excess, like taking something that succeeded and doing it more and bigger. And I mean, even the title itself, Die Harder, says everything you really need to know about what they were trying to do with this film. It's just over the top nonsense, but I still have fun with it.
The challenge that I have with it is, I think you said it. I don't like John McClane as much in this one. And I don't think this is, I don't think you can say the same thing about that we say about the overall arc of Die Hard, that they just kind of get, progressively worse over the course of the entire series, that you can about Bruce Willis's portrayal of John McClane. I actually think there are some significant ups and downs as he gets better and older, and John McClane, in fact, becomes an even more interesting character the older he gets. So I think that this movie represents a real low in Bruce Willis's portrayal of John McClane as a jerk and, a guy whose humor is undergirded by just rage in a film that should be, is otherwise set up as something that is, the second Die Hard holiday film.
Right.
And so it's frustrating to me. And I think that puts a lot of weight on the film for me that the first movie just doesn't have. Apart from that, I know we probably spent too much time talking about the book, Roderick Thorpe's book last week, but we've got to talk about Walter Wager's book this week. It is from a different book series, another commercial fiction book called 58 Minutes. Starring a principal character who is an expert, anti-terrorist task force leader, a captain. He is the principal liaison between, the feds and their anti-terrorist efforts and, local police in New York. The airports, I should say, that are taken down in the book. They take down Newark, LaGuardia, and JFK. And the story is much more interesting, from the perspective of the terrorists and the lead terrorist that is actually perpetrating this whole thing, and his whole purpose, his reason for being. The concept of 58 Minutes is pretty tightly woven into, Die Hard 2, with, some fairly significant changes. The problem, I think, comes that in the book, it is very much a team effort trying to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Our lead detective is, he has the resources of everybody that is in the control tower, the cab they call it. That everybody's around there trying to help him, trying to make this the saving of these airports of all of their primary responsibilities. You don't have any jerk cops. You don't have any sort of lampoonable public servants that are out there to, just to make fun of, just to be idiots. And the movie is, man, they double down on idiocy.
And that's one of my most frustrating things with it is just some of the levels of idiocy in this. Just it leaves me questioning a lot about it. Now, I understand if this situation were to happen, would John McClane, this New York City cop, be the first person they turn to for help? Probably not. So, I mean, guess I can understand it, but at the same time, it plays pretty roughly at times.
Yeah. And that's why in the book, it actually works very, very well, because this guy he's already in the airport because he's waiting for his daughter, not his wife. But if this were to happen and he wasn't at the airport, there is a reason to believe that he would be the first guy you'd call if this were to happen. You know what I mean? Like, he would be an expert that is on scene. And as it happens, he's the guy you need because he knows how all of these systems need to talk to one another. He's not an expert in airport operations. And so, but once you put him in this situation, he knows how to deal with a terrorist situation. And that's what makes the book read like a rocket ship. Everything feels believable. And the movie, it doesn't.
Well, and that's one of those, we'll certainly talk more about this next week also, one of those questions about these adaptations when they take something like 58 Minutes and say, hey, let's find a way to shoehorn this into this property that we've now created that's successful, that happens to be based off this totally different series. Let's find a way to shoehorn this story into the Die Hard franchise. Sometimes it can work. Sometimes it makes for a little more of a frustrating situation. I think there are elements that work, though. Like, I do like the idea of the whole Die Hard at an airport scenario. We've got, these people now trying to figure out how to stop the terrorists at an airport. I do think it's actually an interesting story, even if there are frustrating elements with John McClane trying to be the one solving every little piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And I guess that's something that's also worth talking about with this, as far as the nature of a terrorist story, terrorists taking over an airport as a summer entertainment film. That was certainly something that John McTiernan had on his mind when he directed the first Die Hard. He really was hesitant about that because he said it's such a terrible situation. I don't want to make it into light summer entertainment. And so he had the writers really kind of focus on the robbery part of the characters in that first film, which I think made it really interesting. Here, we really just go whole hog with the terrorist angle, and we actually have terrorists, and they're, freeing this dictator. There's this whole war on cocaine. It's kind of the writers even acknowledged they were kind of hinting at the Iran-Contra, kind of all the stuff going on with the South American kind of stuff that we had going on in the 80s. So there's a lot of that's really kind of put at the forefront here with actual terrorists doing actual terrible things. Yet it is summer entertainment. We have, Renny Harlin here. He said, this ended up giving him the title of the director who killed more people in a summer action movie than anyone before him, because he has the terrorists take down an entire plane of people. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible terrorist act that these people do. And it is this summer entertainment And it's an interesting thing that it was like audiences largely were okay with it. And it's one of those things that I think with this particular film, it's like, okay, is it walking the line okay? Or is this kind of where maybe things started going off the rails as far as what people viewed as summer entertainment? I'm not quite sure, really.
Well, it's an interesting thing. And another comparison to the book I want your take on. They don't do, it's presented a little bit differently in the book. They don't do the thing where the terrorists take over the landing control and adjust sea level, which I don't understand. It's always seemed a little bit absurd to me. But maybe let's just say it can happen the way it is. What happens in the film, we have the terrorists taking an active and direct role in killing, 237 people or however many people are on that plane, right? Mm-hmm. In the book, they actually the big devastation actually kills more people. It's planes crashing into one another in the sky, but it's as a result of them flying too close to one another, not seeing one another. It's an accidental in-air collision that is a result of like running out of fuel and trying to do things, as a result of the terrorist action. So it's like one level removed of terrorist action. Does that soften it a little bit, in terms of terrorism as entertainment? Would that have played better in the movie had they made it more of an accidental, destruction?
Well, I guess I don't have a huge issue with it. I actually think in context of the story about, a story full of gravitas with terrorists taking over the airport. I mean, these are people who do bad things, and here they are doing a terrible thing, right? I mean, and as nonsensical as the whole sea level thing is, because I don't know much about planes. I know that's completely a fabricated thing they came up with for the film. But my understanding of airplanes is they have altimeters, so that at least is telling them how close they are to sea level. So they, in their own plane, they would know, okay, well, we can't see anything, but we know we're at least 200 feet above sea level.
Right. They don't rely on air traffic control to tell them how high in the air they are. That's internal.
Regardless of that, it still is an interesting element to use to really set up the terrorists in a very evil way. And to that end, I think it's actually very effective, as heartbreaking and awful as it is. I think that the villains in this film seem like real terrorists, and I actually enjoy the villains quite a bit. Despite the fact that I think there might be too many levels of them as far as like the different groups and how they all come together. Largely, I do enjoy what William Sadler is doing here as Colonel Stewart. I think his setup at the beginning, doing kind of the naked Tai Chi in his hotel room, sets up a really interesting villain that I feel like at the time I hadn't seen before. And then we get this moment where he actually does this terrible terrorist act. And I've always found it a very effective moment that actually gives a lot of gravitas to the film. Now, I guess the question though is like, is that gravitas that we needed in a big summer movie? I don't know if it's, I don't know if we're the people to answer that. For me, it didn't really bring the movie down for me, but I know for some people it might be like too much. It's like, this isn't some heavy, war drama or anything. I just wanted, fun popcorn entertainment.
Yeah, I hear that. I feel like it does point to an interesting choice they made about the narrative of the terrorists. And in the book, the terrorists are mechanistic and driven toward a singular purpose, and anything outside of that purpose is a distraction. And I think that makes them actually more terrifying. Here, we have these terrorists who take a break from their singular focus of action to demonstrate their raw power and will, and they do it in a way that ends up being, I think, a distraction for the sake of a fabricated, bit of technology that can't happen in real life. And that, I think, makes it less terrifying. As soon as you think that could never happen, I'm no longer scared myself. And I think that's the problem with the moment and why it doesn't work for me. And it's a central question, I think, when you're looking at, making a scary moment on film. at what point does taking the audience out of the realm of reality and forcing them to, suspend their disbelief for something that would have been a largely easy choice to make to keep them in the reality of the film and keep them really scared? At what point is that not serve the ultimate goal of the film? And in this, that sequence, I think, fails. But I want to get back to your point on the fantastic William Sadler doing his naked Tai Chi. I think that's the more important sort of approach to this film is naked Tai Chi.
Yeah, you gotta appreciate any film that kicks off with that.
He looks great, William Sadler. Kudos to him for being in great shape. But I gotta ask, and every time I watch this movie, I have the same question. Where's his junk, Andy? I know you have this strategy when I bring up subjects like this to just be real quiet because you think it's real important that everybody knows that these are the things I think about and you take no part in it. I get that. It's okay. I don't think I'm alone in wondering where William Sadler's junk is. Do they tape it up? Because there is a sequence in here where he does like a half squat spread leg thing in front of the mirror, and you should be able to see junk between his legs, and there's nothing. He's like Ken and Barbie. He is nothing. And I'm always thinking, what do they do mechanically to hide the junk? As a professional in the making of films, I'd like you to address that.
I think it's just angles and lighting.
And I don't know. That's a tough angle to hide. He's great. I don't like how he does the quick draw McGraw with the television remote. I don't believe that would have happened.
There are some elements that they use to heighten the suspense in the beginning to kind of amp that tension, and it's a little silly.
That's not one of them.
That deflates a little bit of the moment. The little quick draw remote. Pew! Turn that TV off.
Right. It's just terrible. So can we talk about the luggage carousel? This is a thing, and it's not the carousel. This is the conveyors, right? The whole giant conveyor system that is, that's in the back of it's behind the scenes of the airport. And I remember, so this came out in 90. It was a couple of years later that Denver International Airport opened, and part of the big news of DIA was that they had a completely automated luggage system that you put luggage, the person at the carrier counter would drop your luggage onto the conveyor belt, and it would just show up at the plane like magic transporter. No one else would need to touch it. They showed all these great behind-the-scenes videos, the promotional things that hit the news about luggage that drops in all these little buckets. And in fact, truly, you could really send luggage and it would never touch a person. It would just disappear into the bowels and show up at your plane. And that was how it was supposed to work ideally. When it launched, it was completely broken. They had to bring in armies of people to essentially set up a second luggage handling system because they couldn't get the robots to work. So here we are a couple of years before that, and we are expected to believe when McClane goes behind the scenes into the luggage area where luggage is on all these like multi-storied conveyors, that in fact there are no humans in this entire cavernous place, with the exception of terrorists who are rigging something to a something, and the robot head squishing machines that for some reason, exist in this space to truly damage our luggage. Right? That's what the implication is. I don't care about the guy whose head gets squished. What are they doing to my luggage at this airport? Terrible things. Again, Andy, it takes me out of the narrative. It's ridiculous.
And I guess this is one of those things that obviously you had more issues with than I did. This is definitely a movie that requires you to let go of some of those sorts of questions and say, you know what? This is an over-the-top, silly action movie. There are going to be crazy things happening, and I'm just going to roll with it. If you roll with it, it's a lot more fun. If all of these things start bogging you down, like where are all the people in the back? What is this nonsensical plane lowering thing? All these different things that are pretty silly. I mean, this was not a movie that air traffic controllers and people who ran planes. None of them liked it because of how silly all of this was. But in context of the fun of watching the movie, if you can let go of that, then it's enjoyable. If you can't, then yeah, everything is gonna end up just piling on as problem after problem.
So what you're saying is you don't, in fact, have a defense for the luggage carrying place.
No, because you're right.
I have not let go enough.
There should be people back there, but it's just one of those things where I'm just like, you know what? It's not something that's ever bugged me. I just don't care that much.
Okay. Then what is a thing that you want to talk about? Because all these things that are on my list are things that bug me.
If there are things that bug me, let's talk about maybe just some of the scripting and stuff. I mean, this is one I had a lot more issues with. We already talked about John McClane and how they treated McClane as far as we both had a harder time really liking him. I found him so much more antagonistic. He meets this janitor, Marvin, who is a very strange character anyway. I don't really like Marvin, the janitor, who seems to be always, I don't know. He just changes a lot through the film. It's very weird.
I couldn't figure out what they wanted to do with Marvin. Was he supposed to be the ghost that haunts the underbelly of the airport? Was he? You're right. It was just weird.
He goes from being like, just kind of like seeing this. He seems like, he's just kind of that guy that everyone's forgotten who's down there, who's going to help John. But then John is like, he's so antagonistic with him at one point. He's just like, I can't remember what it was, maybe about the walkie-talkie. He's just like, how about you let me have it or something? And he's just like, how about I let you live? And I'm like, why does he say that? Like, this guy has been doing nothing but kind of helping him. And here he is just like, what? Like, where did that come from? It was so... And then the guy's like, oh, this is a guy who knows how to negotiate or whatever. It's just like, it's so weird. And then Marvin later is just like, it's just like Iwo Jima. And I don't know. It's just like, I feel like they never really... Or maybe he had been going through rewrites as the script was happening, and it seemed like his character was like 4 or 5 different people all kind of mushed together or something.
Yes, totally. But at this point, Marvin and John McClane are that character mushed together, right? You're right. How about I let you live? So John McClane, this charming ne'er-do-well of a police detective who is always stuck in the wrong place at the wrong time, is now a murderer. That, like, straight up, I'm going to kill a guy for a $5 walkie-talkie.
So there are issues like that. And also just like the way that they wrote McClane, like the last movie we talked about how great Bruce Willis was at doing his monologuing. Like he talks to himself so well. In this film, I felt like he was really struggling with it. And I think it's just the lines that the writers came up with. It's just like, it didn't flow very well. And anytime anyone was speaking, whether it's one of the flight attendants or one of the air traffic controllers or whatever, like I just really felt like a lot of the dialogue was a lot more clunky. Like people just did not have as easy a time getting it out of their mouths. I don't know if that really falls to just the script or if it also is Renny Harlin's direction, but it was definitely more of a struggle with this one than the previous one.
I think we've talked about it once in another context, which is that, having a non-native English speaker sometimes directing native English speakers speaking English in weird contexts. Like it really felt to me like he just didn't have an ear for what sounded normal and natural in English. Like maybe in Finnish, this would have sounded much better. I can't stand the, insurance companies start going bankrupt, Al Powell, his line talking on the phone. It just, it sounds unnatural.
But see, some of that, I think that, I completely agree with you, is that some of that, it could be how Renny Harlin was directing it and getting these performances from the actors. But also I think it's the writers saying, hey, let's do more of what we did last time and really amp it up and trying to kick things up a level, like giving Al terrible lines like that or making him eating Twinkies all the time. It's like, oh, God, really? And just so much. And just like Art Evans playing Barnes, who is this guy in the air traffic control who starts helping kind of, I don't know if it's really secretively, but he kind of starts helping McClane and they kind of work together. But man, I really struggled with his performance as this guy who's kind of helping him. And I don't know if it's him as an actor or if it was just the writing or the directing or what, but it's just like everything that he did in the film, I just really struggled with.
I am right with you, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why. because, I've seen Art in other stuff. I like Art. I think he's a fine and talented actor. Stuff didn't sound right coming out of his mouth, and not just the fact that a lot of his sort of biggest beats were ADR and just didn't come off right. It's strange because there are performances that hold up, I think, very well. I think Bonnie Bedelia, as small of a role as she has, is delightful. And I actually find her interchange with, Thornburg, William Atherton, to be quite funny and interesting and strong. And I really enjoy what goes on up in that plane. Every time I find myself engaged and chuckling, and it's great. So, and Fred Thompson as Trudeau, and sort of in charge of air traffic control, I think he is equally. I think I don't have any problem with his performance, his delivery. Everything does sound natural.
Well, he's just one of those guys who carries weight every time.
Yeah,
he's
talk about
saying
gravitas.
Anything. I mean, he's just he's just perfect to play somebody like this who always looks serious. I mean, I can imagine when he was working as a senator, being very intimidated by anything he said, because he just carries so much weight in everything he says. He's a really interesting guy. I didn't have as much problem with the terrorists, and maybe that's just because largely they don't talk, but I did love seeing, John Leguizamo, Robert Patrick, Vondi Curtis Hall, Mark Boone Jr. all popping up as terrorists in here in minor roles very early in their careers. I thought that was kind of fun to see.
I did too. This was such a wonderful, who's who of bad guys throughout cinema history.
Right.
They're all in here. I thought that was great. Although, can we talk about the skywalk? What is going on there?
This was, it's a fun sequence by action, action sequence expectations. We get everything we want, but yeah, it's like, okay, why are the bad guys out here painting and doing construction and stuff? Like, it's some disguise they have, but why? Like, why are they wasting their time doing that? Just waiting for these people to come out there eventually? It was so silly. Like, when you look at it, it's like, it makes zero sense.
It really does. Like, why do they take three guys armed and put them so far away? I know. I mean, the structure seems to be that we want to put them there because we're saying that the terrorists have thought of everything. They've thought of this one major pathway to, this other antenna. We need to stop them there. And sort of head them off at the pass, and yet it just feels like, why didn't they just take out that antenna? Why do they need to waste? Which they do anyway. Which they do anyway. Why do they need to stage three guys painting? Right. Why do they need to pretend? Because the whole section is closed off anyway. No pedestrians are going there. Why do they have to dress them up?
Yeah.
In painter's garb? I think it ends up being kind of silly.
I think Colonel Stewart he didn't have anything else for those guys to do.
Yeah.
And just like, I need you doing something. Now go
These
paint
These are not our best thugs. We're going to put them in the painting spots. But we do get Robert Patrick's, sitting ducks.
That's right.
A line which is always great. We certainly he's a good goon. He's a very good goon.
He does a good job with it. Yes.
Yeah. We do have. So it's not in this sequence. We do have. And the way that sequence ends, it's the moving sidewalk bit where McClane is trapped under debris and he has to turn the sidewalk on with the pipe in order to the race for the gun, to get the gun to come to him so that he can shoot the goon who's running at him.
That sounded like you were setting up a riddle. To do the thing, to pull the thing, to make this thing.
And into the woods we go.
The house that Jack built.
Right. Right. And so it's good. It's a great, I don't know, it's a great action beat. I always think I've always thought that was a tight action beat. There are some other pretty gooey offings. In particular, the ice pick. Goodness.
Or icicle.
Or the icicle, yeah.
That's just, yeah, it's bloody, it's gory, it's funny. Renny Harlin actually says, I think I was in my bloody period at this point in my filmmaking career, which I think says a lot about what he was doing here. But yes, that is just so over the top. And that was actually one of the things, aside from the terrorists crashing the plane, which caused quite a bit of controversy with him and the studio, as far as the studio, telling him no, he couldn't do that. They wanted it to be an empty cargo plane. He said it needed to be a plane full of people for the gravitas. And they let a test audience decide, and the test audience was okay with it. The icicle to the eye was another thing that the studio was really hesitant about. They thought it was going way too far, having him take out this terrorist with an icicle to the eyeball. But again, test audiences watched it, and as gross as they thought it was, they were okay with it, and so it stayed. It's just, I think it goes to show when you start kind of creating these bigger action movies, people want bigger things, and audiences end up being okay with it, as gory as it is.
Yeah, I guess so. And I go back to, film, your comment around sort of the changing dynamic of sort of cultural expectations in film, and was this yet another milestone on the way to accepting more violence in different kinds of action movies, like in action movies, not straight up horror movies. Like, you don't know what you're going to expect.
Yeah, the 80s action movies into the 90s, I mean, they definitely were amping it up. And like so many genres, and we talk about it all the time with the superhero genres, you start getting tired with some of the expectations that you have. And so they start pulling in different types of genres or subgenres into a genre to kind of modify it. And yes, certainly, especially coming from Renny Harlin, who brought us Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. And I know there's another horror film before he got to this. I think it was called Prison. Doing a horror, moment like that, I think certainly, I guess it's one of those things that you could say, okay, he's doing something different for the action genre that nowadays may not be as shocking.
The stunts were great. It's very cool to see some of these action stunts.
Yeah, there's some really fun stuff. I mean, this is the era when, before all the CG and everything, and seeing the guy, the stuntman jumping out of an actual helicopter onto the actual wing of a 747. I mean, it's, there's something gripping about that. These are people doing something that's, pretty scary. And I think that it speaks a lot to what people kind of just the level of effort they were putting into making these movies.
I have to say, and I know what you're going to say to this one, I just need to let it go, but the fight is awesome on the wing of the plane. I love that they're throwing each other around on this plane. And then he falls off, McClane does, and he grabs the fuel release handle. And as he falls off, the fuel is showering down on the runway. And the first thing I think of is, isn't he going to be covered in jet fuel? And the second thing I think of is, I'm really dying to know what would happen if he really lit up a Zippo in his jet fuel covered hand and dropped it into the fuel trail to blow up that 747. I'm not convinced that it's going to work that way, even though I do like the explosion. There you go.
Yes.
See, I'm opening my heart to the exuberance of fantasy.
It is totally nonsensical, but again, this movie celebrates kind of that over the top actionness of the 80s, if I can just call it that. And I don't know. I guess I just don't have issues with it. I think it's as silly as everything else in the movie. But
it lives up to itself. That's great. Exactly. Glowing praise.
Well, I'm not saying it's a great movie. I'm just saying it does well what it's setting out to do.
Yes. All right.
I guess that's a different point.
You're right. I'll give it to you.
Now, I do want to talk to you about one point that does come up with that bit that you just brought up, the final explosion. Now, we have set up Colonel Stewart as the main antagonist of our story here. We don't get when McClane blows up the plane, he takes out Stewart and Esperanza and all of the goons. The only person he directly takes out, I guess you could say, is Grant, who gets knocked off the wing and sucked through the engine, which is pretty kind of horrific. Back to Renny Harlin and his bloody phase. It's a great way to take out a villain, a baddie in a movie. But do you feel disappointed at all that considering Stewart is kind of the big bad of the film, that we don't get a moment where McClane and Stewart actually are the two who kind of duke it out? Is it okay that it's just this big plane explosion that kills everybody?
I've always been okay with it, and it didn't start to bother me until you brought up this question that maybe I should be bothered. Does it bother you?
No, I don't think it does, but it was just something I was wondering because I'm like, normally you want your antagonist and your protagonist to kind of have that big last moment. And they do. I mean, but at the same time, I'm just like, well, okay, all he does is blow up the plane. He's also killing Esperanza. Would it have been more powerful if Stewart was the one? So that's, I guess, where my head was. Would it have been better if Stewart was the one who got sucked through the engine and then Grant knocked him off the wing and then he blew up Grant and Esperanza? Or is it nice having Stewart, because he's kind of the big bad, be the last one who gets blown up? I don't know if I really know, actually.
I certainly don't know, but I feel like if we'd seen, like, getting sucked into the engine of the plane is gratuitous, it's gross, but it's not satisfying, right? It's not satisfying in the same way. I like the idea that it's not just Stewart getting blown up in the plane, it's the entire bouquet of baddies that are all in that plane. And so this is McClane making actually a bigger statement by taking care of everyone that was troubling the airport, and all at once in a giant ball of flame. I think that's more grandiose.
Well, you're right. And plus you get the big yippee-ki-yay line
along
with it, which does give you that big action beat of satisfaction that you look for.
Super satisfying, right? I mean, I really loved hearing that line.
Oh, yeah. It's absolutely become as part of watching a movie about John McClane as anything else. It's just, right. It's a critical element that you have to have now.
Yes. Absolutely.
So much so that by the time you get to the fifth one, it's a poster tagline: "Yippee-ki-yay, Mother Russia."
Oh man,
I can't wait for that one.
All right.
So I do have to say though, okay, so he blows the plane up, and then you've got the plane and its explosion trail leaves it turns basically it's a light, so all the planes can land. Then you get this music that starts playing, and I'm just like, oh, what is this awful music? And I've never ever liked it. And then I finally, listening to Renny Harlin, who's very proud of his country, Finland. And I say all this now knowing that this music is not Michael Kamen's score, but it's actually a piece called Finlandia by John Sibelius. And Harlin wanted it to be incorporated throughout the score. And here we get the big climactic bit of the music as all the planes come in and land. I'm not saying that the music itself is bad. Everybody from Finland, cool your jets. I think it's great. But as far as the music coming in and all the planes landing, it just feels all of a sudden like really like this oddly like patriotic march sort of thing, like here we come, da, da, da. And it just all of a sudden feels so inappropriate. And it always strikes me as strange music to hit at that moment.
I think that's really funny because it is a patriotic march. Like they're literally patriotically marching the planes back into the runway, and they're doing that was one of the first. You read all of the commentary on this film, and it always comes back to this: that if you tried to stack so many planes on the same runway, there would be massive devastation. There's no way they could clear the runway fast enough. So I always find that really funny because in my head I play that out to all these toy planes crashing into one after another to this giant Finlandia, patriotic music. It's sort of a trope of Harlin's to always include something Finn in his films. Most of the time you'll see Finlandia vodka, which I don't believe you see in this movie. I didn't notice it.
I didn't either.
I wasn't looking all that closely because I didn't figure that out until after I watched the movie. But you see it in things like Deep Blue Sea and Driven and Long Kiss and Cutthroat Island. You get the Finnish flags everywhere. You get Finnish flags, the bottle of Finlandia, or this song. In Ford Fairlane, you do get the Finlandia vodka, but it was lost to the ages because of pan and scan for many years. Before it was re-released, it was cut. It's an empty bottle on the floor of Fairlane's apartment, and the pan and scan cut it out. And so now in re-release, if you watch Ford Fairlane, you'll see the Finlandia bottle on the floor of his apartment. The real
finally,
yes, yeah, finally, the well-deserved finally. The real nod to Finland, however, in that particular movie, is not a song. It is not a flag. It's not even booze. It is in fact Katja Karkainen, who was Karkainen, who was a Finnish Playboy bunny in a weird sex scene, and she is actually the nod to his home country, Finland, in that movie, which I find weirdly funny. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Hail Finland.
Hail Finland. It's just one last little note about the ending. It's interesting to note the very last shot of this film. It was actually a big deal at the time because this was actually a matte painting that they end on of all of the planes parked on the runway. And then what they did, they shot individual groups of people. And then this is the first time that they actually digitally composited them onto a matte painting. So it was actually, if you look at it, because I was watching it, I'm like, God, it always looks kind of funky. Everything else at the ending looks great. And then you get to this last shot and I'm like, it never looks real, but the people are moving and everything. That's what it was. Digitally composited people on a matte painting.
That's awesome.
I don't know how often they did that after this, because soon after this you get to just, digital paintings, digital backgrounds. So
yeah,
I'm
right.
curious how often that ended up getting used.
Can we talk about the central mechanic around the blanks versus the bullets?
Oh yes, the blue versus the red guns.
Blue versus red. I have always found it a little bit ridiculous that blue versus red was a little bit too telegraphed of what they were going for, right? That the red were the live rounds and the blue were the blanks. And I figured it out. I remember figuring it out, in my first viewing of the movie so very early. It felt like such a pedestrian telegraph of what they were, of their central military ruse, that it gave it away too early for me. And I don't want to say that I'm that means I must be really, really good at figuring out things like this. It just felt really sort of like a juvenile play.
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's very it's always come across as pretty obvious to me. And it does make me wonder if they were intentionally being obvious with it.
Yeah.
Or if it was just something where they just didn't do it very effectively because people caught on to it really easily. It's not a big surprise, I guess, So I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm like, it's not a mechanic that works very well for me. The whole thing is only to set up these army people who are actually bad so that this whole firefight between the two of them can be faked. But again, if you go into the mechanics of all that, it all seems really bad anyway, because these army guys are bringing some other non-army guys to the fight too, like the cops and McClane and other people who have real weapons. So I'm like,
That's right.
It just seems not very smart on their part. Like if they're going to actually go about doing this, they should have had everybody stay behind and gone off and pretended to have a firefight or something,
That's right.
But, it goes to the bad guy logic. None of it is very logical throughout this film, which I think they wanted to find a way to amp up some of the logistics with the various levels of authority in the first film, where you had Al, you had his supervisor, you had the FBI guys. They all kind of had a different reaction to McClane and everything going on. And I felt like the writers were trying to do the same thing here, where we had Lorenzo, we had the Barnes, we had Trudeau and the rest of the airport people. Then we had the army guys and all these different levels. But now they're like, well, but what if we make some of them bad this time? And all of that just seemed like they were just going too far. Like I never really, the whole thing with the army guys just never sits that well with me. It always feels like one beat too far in this level of bad guys. And that falls to the whole red blue gun thing. It ends up being a silly element that maybe wasn't necessary.
Totally agree. Okay, so Harlin was just coming off of Nightmare on Elm Street, number 4.
He did Nightmare on Elm Street 4. He actually started Alien 3, which is, I think, quite funny, considering the history of that film. Obviously, it all fell apart. He ended up jumping onto Ford Fairlane, and a film that Joel Silver was also producing. Joel liked him and said, hey, do you want to do the sequel to Die Hard that we're going to be doing? Bruce came over and met him. Everything was hunky-dory, and they said, great. The only challenge with all of this was that for production the production for Die Hard 2 was scheduled to start as soon as Ford Fairlane wrapped. And so he had to figure out a plan to do the post for Ford Fairlane after Die Hard 2 finished. He figured he would just do it all at the same time. But because both of them were scheduled to be summer releases in 1990, he basically, all the post had to be happening while he was shooting Die Hard 2, because he had to get his first cut of Die Hard 2 ready to screen to the studio a week or something after the shoot wrapped. And so pretty much he was shooting Die Hard 2, and he had all of his editors cutting Ford Fairlane and footage for Die Hard 2 as it came in so that everything could get going. It was crazy, and it all worked out. And this opened, and I think Ford Fairlane opened a week after in the summer of 1990. Just a crazy schedule, though.
That's bananas. And also terrible, terrible weather for shooting anyway.
It was a very, very warm winter, and it was very frustrating for them because this was a film where they were, the whole thing was supposed to be taking place during a snowstorm. And so kind of like The Revenant, when Leonardo DiCaprio and company had to, they were getting poor snow, and they had to chase the snow all the way down to Argentina to finish filming that movie.
That's right.
This was one where they kept having to go from place to place trying to find snow. And like they came out to, they did a lot of the interiors in LA, obviously, but like the exteriors, they filmed some in Denver, like all the church exteriors, the airport and runway exteriors were Denver. But when they got out to the church to film there was no snow. And so they had to cover the whole thing with snow and make it all snow. And then, of course, when it came time for the big action sequence, they actually had the biggest snowstorm to hit Denver in 30 years. And there was so much snow falling the night they were supposed to be filming that they couldn't even see like a few feet in front of their face. So they had to cancel it and wait one night. Luckily, the next night ended up being okay. But he said it was just crazy. And for the scene when McClane is crawling out of the hole on the runway to go catch Esperanza's plane, that sequence, if you look at all the different locations that they filmed that whole sequence on, it was over 10 different locations. It was like Michigan and San Francisco and LA and Denver and I think Spokane. It's like they were all over the place trying to chase the snow so that they could make this movie work, which is just hilarious that it was so hard. And then, of course, you get to the final scene when the planes have landed and John and Holly are reuniting on the runway. That was filmed at Stapleton Airport, which I guess audiences might not know. It was the big Denver airport that actually had just closed down before Denver International Airport opened. And so that's why they went and filmed this there. And when they were filming that scene at night, it was so cold. It wasn't snowing, but the weather was so cold that the film was actually freezing inside the cameras. So they had heaters everywhere to try warming up the place. And then they were spraying potato flakes everywhere to make it look like a snowstorm. And Renny Harlin said the whole place just smelled like mashed potatoes because it was like this wet mashed potato mixture all over you. And it was just everywhere. It's just, it's crazy thinking of that, trying to make a movie with snow like this and how complicated it was back then.
Oh yeah, it's actually really funny in the opening sequence. You get this. He's outside in the snow, in front of Stapleton, and then he goes inside and he's shaking snow off his jacket, and you can see the sunny day through the sliding glass doors behind him as they've changed airports. It's very funny, very convoluted production. Let's jump into our deep scene drive briefly.
Let's do it.
This is actually one of Mr. Harlin's very favorite scenes in the movie. We're starting right about an hour 15 into the film. Through hour 19, it's the scene where Esperanza stops the plane and is accosted by McClane. And then John McClane gets trapped by the terrorists who come to take Esperanza away, whisk him away to freedom, and we have a lot of hand grenades.
Oh, yes, we do.
Oh,
good old
do
military
we
funerals.
Why is this a central great scene that represents this movie, and why is it Renny Harlin's favorite scene?
I think we picked this scene because it is a great representation of what Renny Harlin brings to a movie like this. Just really over the top action is really what we get here. And Renny Harlin really liked the scene because he thought it was just a fun challenge of, okay, you put your hero into this really frustrating and difficult situation. How are you going to get him out? And it's one of the most iconic images from the scene and from the film. And you could almost say from the franchise. It is a very iconic shot. And it's when McClane, they trap him in the cabin of this plane that Esperanza's just landed. And then they all start tossing in hand grenades that obviously have very long timers before they go off. And then McClane, his only way out, he straps himself into the pilot's seat, which happens to have an ejector seat, and he ejects himself out. And then you have that fantastic shot from, like 100 feet in the air, looking down as McClane in the ejector seat comes flying right up to the camera, and the explosion goes off underneath him. It's over the top, ridiculous, and very fun in a Die Hard movie.
It is. It's totally ridiculous. It's a giant fireball that is, thanks to our friends at the Internet Movie Firearms Database, actually back up the thing that has always bugged me. The M26 grenades that they use in these scenes have 7 seconds at the long end, 7-second delay before they blow up. And these guys throw what feels like 50 grenades in here over the course of about 30 seconds and before they start to blow up. But he would have been long toast just in the amount of time it takes him to get into the seat. That said, Andy, this is a sequence that I let go. It is so over the top that I can go ahead and be and enjoy with the glee of my inner teenager, because you're right. It's insane, but the look on his face, on Willis's face, is priceless. It's iconic. It is a great sequence. So I am in favor of this one.
All right. That's what I was wanting to hear.
Yeah.
It's an interesting scene. It's not shot as far as like the camera work and everything. Oliver Wood is the cinematographer here. He came over from Ford Fairlane along with a lot of other people. It's pretty, pretty clean camera work. Nothing, we don't have shaky cam. It's, that really hadn't started yet. It's very kind of, the camera's steady, little moves as characters move, like it kind of dictated by characters. Except for one fantastic, emotionally telegraphing move when Esperanza opens the door and says freedom. You have this fantastic move where the camera just basically flies right up into his face as he says freedom, which leads to that cut of John McClane popping in and hitting him in the face and going, "Not yet!" Which it's so silly. It's so over the top John McClane. It works really well. But that's a great camera move that really kind of gives you that lead in that you need for that comic interjection.
Totally. And there are a couple of good camera just angles and placements, when
Sure.
we have the soldier shooting at the door to the pilot's cabin, right? I mean, that's a very cool shot from way back in the top hangar of this thing on the ground, and it looks really cool. Even if you really want to say to that guy, it's not opening, man. Save your ammo. Why isn't your Esperanza dying with the ricochet bullets showering down upon him? But it's a very cool shot. So there are some things, sort of architecturally in the film that really work.
It's got some fun effects. And I think, the model work here, this plane, which was really kind of all this plywood thing that they had fabricated, it looks great. I think that what ILM did as far as the blue screen work with John McClane kind of going up in the seat, up to the camera basically, and then the great miniature explosion work that they had going on behind him. I think they did a very effective job. And sure, throughout this film, you can see when there's some of that blue screen or the rear screen or front screen projection work that you have. You can kind of tell it's an old enough film where some of that is pretty obvious. But I think it's still effective. I don't really have an issue with it.
We had a problem with one of the cuts in Die Hard 1 where there was some controversy about the sort of clarity of the edit, where it looks like it is in fact McClane shooting at Al Powell because we're missing a shot. And actually, if you look at it, it is much more clearly the terrorists up on a different floor shooting at the car, and it's just unclear. This film was edited by Stuart Baird and Robert Ferretti, and I wonder, are there any of those issues in this sequence? Is it clear? I know there's a question around, how did the terrorists know McClane is in the plane? Do we have a clear sense of where he's positioned because they show up and just start shooting at the plane? Where's Esperanza? How do they know they're not shooting at him?
Yeah, there were definitely some editing moments like that. Like, how did they just show up and start shooting? I mean, he wasn't standing in the doorway Were they far enough away, but close enough where they could see McClane running up to the plane? What was the logic for them arriving and just opening fire? I mean, for all intents and purposes, they were going to this plane expecting Esperanza to be there. So it was very strange for them to show up and start shooting.
Yeah.
That was, I felt, some poor editing.
Because we never have a sense of place for them. Like, once the shooting starts, then they get close. But we don't know where they are when they start shooting.
Right, exactly. And likewise with the grenades. I mean, that the suspense there is drawn out to almost a point of absurdity. And you don't really, I mean, they said that, okay, we've got three each, 3 per guy or whatever he says. So, okay, 9 grenades. That's how many they're going to throw in. But it does feel like that's happening forever.
Yeah, it's happening forever, and the grenades just sit there. And every grenade makes it into the cabin. I would have been the guy bouncing grenades off of the hull of the plane.
Well, you weren't military trained by Colonel Stewart.
I mean, that is a fair point, but still, that's quite a lob to get it through those. Get every one of your grenades into the. I'm just saying.
I hear you. I agree.
It's all a stretch.
It is. You know what I love about this sequence also? Michael Kamen's music plays pretty nicely through the duration, and it feels very Die Hard. The music that he wrote, I mean, he used a lot of his themes from the first film and everything, but it just has a great feel. This sequence, I think the music is just spot on, exactly what it needs to be. But I love that right before Esperanza exits the plane, as he's kind of looking around the interior of the plane, there's some sleigh bells in the music. I love that little nod to the sleigh bells again, which I'm starting to think might be a hint of that Kamen was using as kind of a leitmotif almost for McClane, as like a hint that McClane is present. He's nearby. I loved that little nod that we had.
I even felt like there were little cadences of Ode to Joy in here. Bum, 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 dum, ring-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling.
Yeah,
dun,
right,
dun,
right.
dun. Like, I feel like he was bringing back more than just the sleigh bells, even as McClane's theme. I really like it, and I think Kamen is at his best when he's doing these kinds of integrations. They're very clever musically.
Absolutely. No, I really think that he does a great job here. One last thing before we move past this, our deep scene dive. I do have to say, it's a frustrating moment to end this sequence on, because it again highlights the terrible comedy, or I guess I should say the struggle with writing McClane that Stephen E. D'Souza and Doug Richardson seemed to be having this go around. You get him landing his parachute in the snow, and then you get just an awful ADR line. Where's the bleeping door? It's like, really? That's what we're going to end this scene on? Is this stupid line? Like, oh, that was terrible. It was frustrating to kind of have a fun sequence end on such a terrible line.
It should be it needed a stinger, wah, wah, or a car horn.
Yeah, exactly.
Auga. Yeah, just terrible. Other cast and crew highlights as we do a little bit of rapid fire here. The Thing, as you mentioned, was written by or adapted by Stephen Souza and Doug Richardson, based on the Walter Wager book 58 Minutes, as we have talked about.
It's one of those situations where I wonder if 58 Minutes would have just been a better film if it were adapted straight from the book without having been shoehorned into the Die Hard franchise. That being said, I think that they still have enough fun with it, even if it was a little more frustrating with some of the ways that they chose to take it direction-wise. You know, I will say something that also I think is funny is Renny Harlin, listening to his director's commentary on this, he actually says like he had forgotten how much swearing was in this film. And he's just like, man, I don't know if he's like, I felt like this was really something of the time where people felt like we needed to make it harder. And so we put a lot more swearing in it. He says, I would never do that now. Like, unless there was a character motivation to have that much swearing, there's no reason I would have done it. And that's something I really noticed with this. It's like, God, they are swearing. Like, even the guy, like the co-pilot, when he says, oh, they're not the beacon, the certain beacon that is supposed to be beeping.
Yeah.
And he says it's talking, like he drops an F-bomb in there. And I'm like, why is he all of a sudden swearing? Like, it just is so out of character for some of these people. But it felt so written. And I think that is one of my biggest gripes with this. As fun as the movie is, I think that it feels like it was forced writing often.
Yeah, I struggled with it. I don't know what to say about it because I'm tempted to say this is a sign of Renny Harlin and his maturity as a director. But
I don't know if that's
necessarily apt.
Considering this film is the highest ranked film of his over at IMDb. I mean, he's just kind of gone downhill, you could say, from 1990. I don't know if I don't know. I struggle with Renny Harlin. I think that he can be a really fun director. I mean, I absolutely love The Long Kiss Goodnight, which we've talked about on the show. But boy, I feel like he's really struggled with his career, and he's made a lot of stinkers. I mean, 19 movies. His IMDb average is 5.7 out of 10. So
his average doesn't meet the IMDb 6-star rule. He goes into this thing wanting to kind of replicate the experience, he says, of the first movie. That's not a copy, but that it's amped up. I'm just not convinced that was necessarily the right strategy for this. And I know we're going to talk about this very subject when we come back around to the rest of the Die Hard series. But it did feel like a copy, like a terrible, mimeographed copy of the first movie, where you can see the soul of it. You can see kind of the scaffolding of it. But as you say, it's so written and if the effects and things are enough to have fun with it, then so be it. But for me, I struggled. Let's talk about the hit short film The Wait.
We should everybody should check this hit short film out, shouldn't they?
They really should, Andy, and you'll find the link in the short notes. The Wait is what would you call this? Was this your thesis project, your final project?
It was not my thesis film project.
Oh.
It was a film. You say that disappointed. Oh, that's why it's so terrible.
Keep going. I'll tell you why.
Well, it was a film I did. It was in a 16 millimeter film class where it was the non-synced sound. So it was essentially, we had to do a film with no synced audio. And so it's largely internal monologue from the principal character, who is waiting at the airport for his girlfriend's flight to arrive, and goes through flights of fancy, I guess you could say, imagining why it's delayed. And yes, I will say that there is some footage from Die Hard 2, and actually some from Die Hard as well, that might have made their way into my film. So
you might see it. Eagle-eyed viewers might find.
They just might notice.
A couple of other brief notes on The Wait. The star performer in The Wait is the one and only Chad Stoops. You may remember he used to be a regular on this show, and we love Chad. And yours truly,
that's you,
did do his final thesis project on your non-final thesis project. I was doing my undergraduate degree in long format production, journalism, and I did the making of Andy's movie, and both of them are in the show notes if you want to see Andy's fantastic short film and the making of it. You should check out the show notes.
And I just have to say,
shameless 25-year-old plug.
I know, right? But I just have to say how lucky was I? So here I am making this student film.
Stunned.
And I am, Denver International Airport is a brand new airport in Denver. Go figure. And I'm like, okay, I need to film this at an airport. And so I go and talk to the airport. And they had, so there were 3 concourses, and I can't remember, we were in concourse A where we were filming. Whoever was going to be the main airline using concourse A as kind of one of their home bases had pulled out. And so it was virtually an empty concourse. And they gave me, this film student with no permits or anything, complete freedom to film at this concourse as like for a whole week. Spring break, we were filming there, and it was crazy. Like I had like the most amazing production value because I had like an entire airport concourse to film it. It was great.
That was awesome.
Those were the days.
Yeah. Although
good luck trying to do that nowadays.
Yeah, not a chance. That was really fantastic. Okay, how to do an award season, Andrew?
Well, this wasn't a big
this
award
movie,
winner.
not The Wait.
Oh, right. Oh, not The Wait. Well, that also wasn't a big award winner, but hey. This film had one win and one nomination. Now, the one win, I don't know if you can count it as a win. It was a BMI Film Music Award for Michael Kamen. But this is one of those awards where everybody who gets a nomination is a winner. So he won, but so did all the other 11 nominees who also were nominated. So I don't know if that really counts. And then it was also nominated for by the Japanese Academy, Best Foreign Film. Way to go, Japanese Academy.
What?
Luckily, they did give it to Field of Dreams instead of this one. So
Wow.
Die Hard 2, Best Foreign Film.
Wow.
I know.
Not a lot of imports to Japan.
Surprising.
That year,
yeah.
it sounds like. We know, obviously, there are lots more Die Hard movies to talk about, which we will do, but how did it do in the box office?
Well, Renny Harlin was given more than twice what John McTiernan had to play with, and certainly made it bigger, bloodier, and die-hardier. He got $70 million to make his sequel, or $128.8 million in today's dollars. Aiming for another summer success, the movie had a limited 4th of July release before hitting theaters big time on July 6th, 1990, opposite everyone's favorite TV adaptation, Jetsons, the movie. Die Hard 2 easily took the number one slot, bumping out Days of Thunder. It went on to make $117.5 million domestically and $122.5 million internationally, earning a total of $441.7 million in today's dollars, making it one of the most profitable Christmas films, and almost doubling that of Die Hard. Interestingly, it was domestically 8th highest grossing for 1990, one slot behind its predecessor in 1988, and tied its predecessor as the year's 3rd highest grossing R-rated film domestically. I think that goes to show that 1990 was a vastly more profitable year for movies than 1988 was. The movie ended up with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $2.5 million, beating out its predecessor. It may not be as good as the first one, but it did certainly prove that Willis's McClane is a movie character people wanted more of.
All right, Andy, it's time. Let's rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see our list of films. But for this film, just swipe over in your show notes. You can click on the Flickchart link. It'll take you straight to this movie where you can add it to your personal Flickchart account. Where do we start?
Die Hard 2 or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I would say Oh Brother.
Yeah.
Die Hard 2 or The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. I'm going to say Die Hard 2.
Yeah, I'll give you Die Hard 2.
Die Hard 2 or Gremlins. Gremlins for me.
Gremlins.
Christmas versus Christmas. We didn't talk about this being another Christmas film.
All right, back to back.
People always, say Die Hard is a Christmas movie, but you never hear people saying Die Hard 2, everyone's favorite Christmas movie.
I've heard it more just in reading up on this film. I've heard that more. People who are saying that this is the movie that they watch, where they always watch the double feature, that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Die Hard 2 or Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. I'll say Star Trek 3, I guess. I don't know. I'm going to say Die Hard 2, actually. I'm really wavering, clearly.
Really?
I'm wavering quite a bit. It's Star Trek 3. I struggled with that one more than most of
I know.
the
I know. I did too. You know, it's all in the bottom half. Like it's all in this well of movies that aren't quite. I can go either way. If you're feeling
Die Hard 2, it's a more fun movie to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Die Hard 2 or Pale Rider.
Pale Rider.
Pale Rider. Die Hard 2 or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, 2011, David Fincher.
It'd be Die Hard 2, 2011. I mean, David Fincher. I'd like all of them. This is Dragon Tattoo for me.
It's quite an amalgam.
Yeah.
I'll say Dragon Tattoo. Die Hard 2 or It Happened One Night. It Happened One Night for me.
It Happened One Night.
Die Hard 2 or Run Lola Run.
Run Lola Run.
Excellent. Die Hard 2 or all the way back to The Thin Man.
The Thin Man.
I'll go with The Thin Man. I almost wanted to take it to the mat, but it's not worth it. So that puts Die Hard 2 at 228 out of 332 on our chart.
Well, how does that stand on your personal list, Andy?
My personal list, like I said, it's not a good film, but I do have fun with it. I actually have it at 665 out of 3885, or it's about 83%.
That's really high.
I know.
That's really high.
Well, it's in the 600s.
Yeah, but out of the
600 some
3,000s. Mine's at 697, also in the 600s. Out of 1,000. It's at 31%.
I know.
For
What can I say?
letterbox.com/thenextreel, this comes in, if I were to go, again, by the flick chart algorithm, this should be a 1.5 star film for me. I'm feeling gracious, so I'll toss it an extra half star and give it a 2.
I'm going to sound absurd with my ranking.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
No, I'm not. It's not super absurd, but I am going to give it a 3 with a like, because as many problems as I have with it, I do have an awful lot of fun. Like, I have never been bored with this movie. I've never wanted to turn it off. I will always sit and finish it. It's one of those movies. It's just bad, but it's bad and fun. So
that's fair.
3
I have them too.
And a like. So there we are.
That leaves it at a 2.5 and a like for the show.
Yes, it does.
And that means we're going on to next week's Die Hard 3.
Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Sam Jackson.
Yes.
It'll
be a fun one to jump back into. More John McTiernan. Another one that comes to us from a story that was not a Die Hard story before it was integrated into the franchise. So I'm looking forward to chatting more about that one next week.
Thanks, everybody, for downloading the show. We sure appreciate it. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
We've got a couple of 1 stars coming to us from the fine catalog of reviews, Amazon.com. Would you like to go first? Would you like me to go first? What do you think?
I'll kick it off here.
All right.
I've got a 1 star by a customer who says it's the second worst movie of all time. The first and third Die Hard movies are great, but this one... Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I don't think they mean 5 stars there.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah.
I guess because Renny Harlin directed it. He's not my favorite director either. The series would be a whole lot better if this movie wasn't made. Wish I could put no stars, but it won't let me. What's interesting about this review, Pete, is they don't say what is the first worst movie of all time.
I don't think I'll be able to sleep tonight.
I'm going to be dwelling on this for a very long time.
A very long time indeed, Andy. My review comes from Soylent Green, who says, one simple oversight kills this movie for me. The big issue of this, I wonder if they'll actually tell us what it is.
Right.
The big issue of this movie, I did enjoy it at the time it was made, since I didn't realize it, that makes it unwatchable to me is the simple idea that someone obviously forgot, which anyone residing within an hour's drive of D.C. would clearly and quickly realize. Dulles Airport is within a half-hour drive to what is now Reagan National Airport, and not much further to BWI in Baltimore. A simple phone call or drive to either one to warn them would have rendered our hero John pretty useless, since all they would have done is simply call the planes from either of them, and then had them divert to either one, since they were, by air, about 10 minutes further from Dulles. Did someone not do their research on what nearby airports there were? They could have phoned from there to make arrangements to land in Richmond, Virginia, Norfolk Naval Air Station, Patuxent Naval Air Station, Maryland, or others. South enough where the snowstorm would not have been an issue, or landed in Andrews Air Force Base, or any number of other regional airports that were close enough. The simple oversight has killed this movie for me. And you know, Andy, it didn't kill the movie for me at the time, and now I think it might have. And here's why. Because they actually took care of this in the book. In the book, they went ahead and knocked out all of the major airports in the vicinity. So there was no choice, right? This was a central thing. They knock out Newark, they knock out JFK, they knock out LaGuardia, right? It's a much further trip to go someplace else in the middle of the storm. Like they set that up better. In this movie, they didn't. I didn't even think about that. We should have probably caught that point. The other thing that bugs me is since they were shooting at Stapleton in Denver, where there isn't another major international airport, I guess you go down to Colorado Springs. That's close enough, but it was very small.
They have the base.
That also
too.
Bugs me. Yeah, you're right. Air Force Base. Like there's a lot that can Peterson Air Force Base. I guess they could. They had options there, but it's pretty frustrating in Baltimore now. They make a big deal that it's Washington D.C. and that's yet another thing I have to get pissed off about.
Again, my suspension of disbelief. I don't have an issue with it. I think it's okay. But it does beg the question, couldn't they have just written it to take place in Denver, where it would have been a little more of a stretch? But,
Right.
Oh, well.
Oh, well. Thanks, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise crews on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy, and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy, and East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.